All right, everyone, it's time to talk about why transgenderism technically does not even exist at all. The term is a misnomer for actually trans identity more than transgender. Gender is dichotomous. If a person has a Y chromosome, they are male. If they do not have a Y chromosome, they are female. This basic, very rudimentary definition covers 100% of humanity, by the way. The only close to actual transgender situation you can get is a male who has a secondary mutation. It's called CASE, actually. CAIS, I believe it is, in which a secondary, I believe, 46Y mutation prevents the body from being able to process testosterone. It's still being produced, but it can't do anything with it. As such, that individual, while technically male, they have a Y chromosome, has undescended, undeveloped testes. They do not have a penis. It develops into a vagina. And that's because, morphologically speaking, when a person is born, morphologically, we're all female. The phenotype is technically female for everybody that's born. What happens is that on the secondary basis, testosterone is administered, and the secondary sex characteristics of a male, including the ability to reproduce, are actually created. Effectively, it's the creation of gametes that matters more than anything else when we're talking about gender. Now, gender identity is a totally different story. A person can identify as whatever they want to. I can identify as an apple. Doesn't mean that that has changed my gender. Sex is usually paired with gender, although not always. There are men, again, that have vaginas simply because of that secondary mutation. There are people with various, well, you can call them disorders or just mutations, like Turner's syndrome, for example, sterile females. No Y chromosome present, presents fully as female, just can't get pregnant. That's the only difference. They can't produce the gametes necessary to actually create a baby. But that doesn't mean that they're not female. They are female. And then you have XXY among men. So this causes excessive breast tissue sometimes, a tendency towards weight gain, and a few other effects. But overall, it's just a normal dude who happens to have a secondary mutation, basically the X chromosome. And so they're still fertile, they're still male. It's just that there are certain health complications associated with that. But you can't change the production of gametes within the body. And that's what gender is. Gender has been misconstrued by people who want to hijack the concept, bootstrap it to the LGBTQ plus MAP 102 IOU sort of thing, and but that's not proper. What you're talking about is gender expression. So how you phenotypically express yourself. Part of this is how you dress, how you act, etc. Cultural mores are involved with this. Some of it is cultural as well. I would note that a large proportion of individuals who transgender themselves go out of their way to do one of two things: either being as ostentatious as possible. So then it leans into the attention seeking realm, or hypermasculinity slash hyperfemininity. And so you'll get someone who's like, they're born female, right? And they get bottom surgery, they take testosterone and stuff. But instead of being like, hey, I'm just a dude, it's more like, hey, I'm dude, hear me roar. I am too furry to ignore. And hyperdosing the testosterone and wearing a biker shirt and stuff like that, like almost clinging to a civic stereotype of what masculinity actually is. The same is true for people who are, male, but they're taking estrogen and stuff like that, and they're wearing a pink tutu and having tea parties and stuff like that. So you've got sort of opposite ends of the pole. But this is all behavioral. This is all cultural. This has absolutely nothing to do with what your junk is producing. Effectively, a Y chromosome is male, absence of a Y chromosome is female. That is gender. The way that you choose to express it does not matter. No, and that includes taking hormones, that includes getting surgery, that includes living a certain way. Again, that's all cultural or phenotypical. None of it has to do with genetics. None of it has to do with the underlying basis of reproduction, and things of that nature, or even the hormones necessarily. If you have to artificially inject yourself with the pheromone, with the hormones that you need to present in that, again, technically stereotypical fashion, well, that's different. A person, for example, could simply say, well, I'm female, but I actually feel male. Well, okay, I'm male, and then do literally nothing. Don't take any hormones or anything like that. They could do that. They could still express themselves as a male. Again, it's behavioral and it's cultural as well. This brings up, of course, a whole can of worms of various issues with regards to the legal system, ethics, biology, all of these other things. But one thing is quite clear. True transgenderism is not real. It does not exist. When we're talking about gender affirming surgery, bottom surgery and breast removal and stuff like that, what we're really talking about is people who have dysphoria. They have a mental issue of sorts. This is not to say that everyone that is transgendered is. I'm not saying that they're nuts or anything like that. I'm simply saying that is the root of why they're feeling that way. Again, it could be some sort of secondary mutation in that case too. Of course, the brain is different from what's down there. Let's say that the brain, for some unknown genetic reason, has progressed in the sense emotionally and chemically that a person genuinely is male or female, but feels like they're of the opposite gender. That's perfectly fine. I don't personally think that a consenting adult should be prevented from wearing what they want, screwing people how they want, living how they wish to live. That would be bad. As a classical liberal, I don't really care if they do that. It's only when you've got perversion and or children brought in that it becomes a problem. No, I do not believe in giving hormone blockers to small children. I think that's a terrible idea. I also think it's medically unethical, and I think that in the future, people are going to understand that. It's just right now, the going hegemon is, well, it's perfectly okay. Little Timmy's 8 years old. He's not old enough to sign a contract. He's not old enough to buy a car, serve in the military, drink, smoke, or really make any of his own decisions without permission from others. But he is allowed to have life-changing, hormone-blocking therapy pending surgery that in some cases is literally coerced by a bunch of usually it's the mother, a bunch of people in society that are sick. And so they want other people to be sick too because they want to be special. That happens all the time. There's peer pressure actually on kids now, especially on white male children. White male children specifically appear to be singled out because if you're a white straight male, then you can be criticized, bullied, even physically harassed, and nobody does anything about it. Nobody gives a shit about you. But if you become transgendered, now you're all of a sudden part of a protected category. And so nobody can do jack shit. It's the only way for a white straight male actually to avoid being discriminated against is to call themselves a woman at this point, which I find very, very sad. And it's not limited to just that. I mean, white straight females are also discriminated against. Males of any kind, unless they're gay or something, are discriminated against. You have this sort of weird hierarchy that has been built, a hierarchy of privilege, so to speak. And the left is gleefully building it still, in which you categorize people according to, you know, basically the color of their skin, their junk, and their proclivities in bed. And socioeconomic status, of course. If you're poor, that gives you at least part of a brownie point. Or if you're indigenous, regardless. I'm 1/16th Abenaki, so you're not allowed to criticize me because technically I'm a full-blooded Injun. This is all nonsense when you think about it. Sex is your genitals. Penis, vagina. Some people are hermaphrodites, admittedly. That is sometimes separate from the genetic coding because of mutations. Again, as I've said, mutations of various kinds, um, and so forth. But the gender is really just the production of gametes. It's nothing more than that. It is usually, but not always, linked up with the sexual organs, which can be modified. You can modify your phenotype. Yes, it is possible for a dude to have his penis inverted and have a vagina. It is possible for a woman to have her vagina mostly sewn up and, have a fake penis. That's the phenotype, though. This is not the underlying genetics. This is not gender. This is just phenotypical sexual organ, changes that are being done. It has absolutely nothing to do with whether you've got a Y chromosome or not. So you can't actually transgender yourself at all. It's physically impossible with today's technology. Now, in the future, is it possible that they will develop technology that can quite literally radically change a person from male to female? Well, we do see in the animal world, some animals do have that capability. They are capable of switching truly between the two genders. They are capable of changing their sexual organs accordingly. Humans, at the moment, do not have the ability to do so. As such, there has never been a transgendered human on the face of the earth because it's not transgendered, it's transgendered identity. Because the only thing that you're changing are the phenotypical characteristics, and oftentimes, again, and this is not bizarre to me, it's quite obvious why this is, changes in behavior, changes in the way in which person participates with their surroundings, civics, and so forth, and things of that nature. Cultural norms, the way you dress, the way you act, and so forth. And it tends to be, again, quite hyper. So a transgendered male to female individual, using estrogen and so forth, is likely to put on an air of hyper femininity. And likewise in reverse. This has been something that I'm not the only one that has noticed that this is the case. You're saying that, gender means nothing and I can change it at will, but you're still going along with the same gender norms. You're still wearing a skirt or the biker jacket or something like that. So it becomes a little bit confusing. So yeah, you can't change genders. Not on the genetic level. It's not possible. Phenotypically, yes. Behaviorally, yes. Culturally, yeah, absolutely. And cultures differ on what the gender roles are anyway. So, I mean, Scottish men don't see it as a problem to wear a skirt. They just call it a kilt. It's really a skirt. But anyway, getting beyond the kilt argument, yes, transgenderism is not technically real at all. In fact, we shouldn't even be using the term. Should be trans identity or something like that because the gender hasn't changed. It's the identity associated with the gender and or the phenotype associated with the gender, the outward expression of the genetics, which has been altered artificially. Again, not saying that I give a damn, but you haven't actually changed genders. That's about all. Peace out.